Montana Territory. 1883, the first time Quentin Zeller saw her, she looked like she had not eaten in 3 days and would sooner slit a throat than ask for help. He had not meant to buy a bride. He had ridden into Fort Benton for timber and horseshoes, not to walk away with a woman. But there she was standing on a warped platform outside the general store, among 6 other women bound for marriages they never chose. Her chin was up, her dress too thin for the cold, and her eyes. They held a fury that made him stop breathing for a second. The man selling them called her number 4, like she was cattle. Dakota Clarefield, 22, no family, strong, knows how to cook and sew. Trouble, though, he added like it was a warning. Cut a man in Kansas City last month. Quentin looked at her again. Her hair was dark, braided tight and coiled at the nape of her neck. Her hands were clenched. She looked like she would rather die than beg. "I'll take her," Quentin said, surprising even himself. He paid $80 in silver, signed a paper that was more threat than contract, and turned to Dakota. She did not thank him. She said, "I do not belong to you." "I know," he replied. They rode out in silence. She sat stiff in the wagon beside him, arms folded, eyes never leaving the horizon. The sky was bruising with dusk, and wind snapped across the prairie like it had teeth. Quentin offered her his coat. She ignored it. They reached his homestead by nightfall, 2 rooms, a barn, and a stretch of land backed up against the pines. He kept to himself, raised cattle, and had not brought a woman home since his mother died 5 winters ago. It was quiet land. Good land. "You have a place to sleep?" she asked, stepping down from the wagon. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I am broken. That is why you brought me here." "No," he said simply. "I think you are angry, and I figured no one else would leave you alone long enough to cool off." She stared at him for a long time, like she was waiting for him to laugh or change his mind. He did not. She turned and walked into the house without another word. Quentin stayed outside, watching the wind whip through the tall grass. He had done a foolish thing, maybe, but he had seen something in her, something sharp and hurting. Inside, Dakota found the bedroom bare but clean. A quilt folded at the foot of the bed. She sat down hard and let the silence close around her. No chains, no locked doors, no man trying to touch her. She lay down and stared at the ceiling until sleep came like a fist. The next morning she cooked breakfast without a word. Eggs, biscuits, hot coffee. She did not ask if he wanted any. She just put the plate on the table and sat across from him with her arms crossed. Quentin nodded once and ate. "You do not expect me to," she started, then stopped. "I do not expect anything," he said. Dakota looked away, jaw tight. After breakfast, she followed him outside. Without asking, she grabbed a bucket and headed for the well. She helped feed the chickens, mended a broken fence, and by noon she was covered in dust and sweat. She did not complain once. "Why did you buy me?" she asked suddenly, wiping her forehead. Quentin looked up from where he was fixing a saddle. "Because you looked like you needed out of that place." "That is pity." "Maybe," he said, "but I figured you deserved better than being sold to some drunk with a mean backhand." Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite. That night he was laying out a blanket in the barn when she came in without warning. "You do not have to sleep out here," she said. "It is your house." "I know." She shifted her weight. "I am not going to touch you, and I do not want you touching me." "Fair enough," he said. "Still," she said, eyes flicking away, "you should not freeze out here." He nodded but did not move. She looked at him long and hard. "You are not like other men." "I get that a lot," he said, and she laughed, sharp and unexpected. She covered her mouth fast, like it had surprised her too. She left without another word. Days passed. Then a week. Dakota worked harder than any woman Quentin had ever seen. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was straight to the point. She slept in the bedroom. He stayed in the barn. They shared meals in silence. But something shifted between them. One morning she caught her skirt on a nail and cut her leg. Quentin knelt, cleaned the wound, bandaged it with gentle hands. "You do not even flinch," she said, watching him. "I have seen worse," he replied. "From your wife?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Never had one." She looked away. "Me neither," he chuckled. "I gathered." It was the first time they both smiled at the same time. Then came the knife. It was a quiet afternoon. Quentin had just come in from hauling feed. He opened the back door and found Dakota crouched by the stove, knife in hand, eyes wild. "Whoa," he said, raising his hands. "What is going on?" She did not say anything, just held the blade tight. He stepped closer. "Dakota, what is it?" "I heard a rider," she said, voice low. I thought someone came to take me back." "No one is coming," he said gently. "You are safe here." Her hand shook. Then she lowered the blade. "I am sorry," she whispered. I do not know how to stop waiting for the worst." Quentin stepped forward and took the knife from her hand. He set it on the table. Then, without thinking, he brushed her cheek with the back of his fingers. "You do not have to be scared anymore," he said. Her eyes filled with tears she would not let fall. And for the first time, she did not pull away when he touched her. That night, he stayed in the house. He made a bed on the floor, not wanting to crowd her, but she stood in the doorway and watched him for a long time. "You should sleep in the bed," she said finally. "I do not want to make you uncomfortable." "You do not," she said. "Not anymore." He rose slowly. "Are you sure?" Dakota nodded. "I trust you." It was only 4 words, but they landed like a hammer in Quentin's chest. He followed her into the bedroom and they lay side by side, not touching. But the silence between them was warm now, safe. And when she reached for his hand in the dark, he held it tightly. The April thaw came slow and stubborn, leaving the earth sodden and heavy underfoot. Snowmelt trickled down from the ridge behind the cabin, feeding the creek that curved along the edge of the pasture. Quentin had taken to walking the fence line alone at dawn, letting his boots sink into the softening ground, checking for breaks and loose rails. Inside the cabin, Dakota was mending a canvas satchel she found in the loft. She worked by the window, needle flashing in the morning light, her brow furrowed in concentration. She hadn't asked if it was his to claim. She just set to repairing it like it had always been hers to fix. When Quentin returned, he paused in the doorway, watching the thread pull tight between her fingers. "You planning a trip?" he asked, brushing mud from his coat sleeve. She didn't look up. "Figured you could use it come branding season." The old one's torn through beneath. He stepped inside and hung his hat on the peg beside the door. "You remember spring branding?" "I remember a lot," she said, setting the needle down. "Been on a few drives, wasn't always stuck behind a stove." He leaned against the table. "Where?" "Started outside of Wichita. My uncle had a spread. Took me on for a season when I was 15. Said I rode better than his foreman." She gave a dry laugh. "Didn't stop him from selling me off 2 years later." Quentin didn't move. "You ever think about going back to what?" she asked. "A graveyard. He drank himself to death last winter. I read it in a notice nailed outside a saloon." She stood and crossed to the hearth, stoking the fire with a piece of split pine. Her shoulders were tense, but her voice held steady. "I don't regret leaving," she said. "But I never thought I'd end up here." He waited, letting the silence stretch. "You think I should be grateful?" she asked, still facing the flames. "For being bought like a mule, only to end up patching another man's things?" "I don't expect gratitude," he said. "But I didn't bring you here to put you to work." She turned then. "Then what did you bring me here for?" He met her eyes. "To give you a place no one could take." Dakota stared at him, something unreadable turning behind her gaze. Then she picked up the satchel and set it carefully beside the door. "Then let me carry my share," she said. "You don't owe me peace if I can't earn it." That evening, Quentin saddled 2 horses. He didn't say why until she came out wearing her coat and gloves, hair pinned back under a wool scarf. "Fence line runs crooked past the south ridge," he said. "Could use another set of eyes." She mounted without question. They rode side by side through the last of the slushy snow, hooves squelching through the thaw. The wind had softened, carrying the scent of damp pine and old leaves. Quentin pointed out where deer tracks had broken the earth near the north corner. Dakota dismounted to inspect the post. "It's loose," she said. "Torn right out. Likely from the storm last week." They worked without speaking much, lifting the rail together, driving the stake back in with a mallet he passed her. When she struck the post, her sleeves pushed up, revealing a scar that wound along the inside of her forearm. He glanced at it, then away. "Where'd that come from?" he asked, not pressing. She gave the post one last strike. "Riverboat cook came at me with a pan. I came back with a broken bottle." Quentin nodded once. "I hope the pan lost. He bled more than I did." They finished the repairs as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the pines. On the ride back, Dakota glanced sideways at him. "You always this quiet, only when I'm thinking." "What about?" He didn't answer right away. "How peace doesn't always come easy. How sometimes it shows up looking like trouble." She looked straight ahead after that, but a small breath escaped her like a laugh that didn't quite make it. That night, they sat outside on the porch steps, mugs of coffee held between their hands. The stars were sharp above them, the moon a silver curve just cresting the trees. "You ever married before?" she asked, her voice low. "No," he said. "Didn't see the point, until now." Dakota sipped her coffee, then set it down. "I don't need a ring." "I wasn't offering one," he said gently. "I was just saying, I didn't expect this." She tilted her head toward him. "What exactly is this?" He turned to face her. "You here, me wanting you to stay." Her breath caught, and she looked away quickly as if the words had unsettled something deep. "I don't know how to be someone's anything," she said. "Then don't be," he replied. "Just be here." She nodded slowly, then reached for his hand again, not tentative this time, but sure, and he held it long after the coffee went cold in their cups. The creek had settled into a steady murmur by the time June came, and the hills around the homestead were thick with lupine and arrowleaf. Days ran long but quiet, filled with the rhythm of planting, repairing, and stock checking. Dakota took to the land like she'd been born to it, not because it welcomed her, but because she refused to be turned away. By late afternoon, she was bent over a row of beans, sweat darkening her collar, earth under her nails. Quentin came from the north field, carrying a crooked-handled spade and a coil of fencing wire slung over his shoulder. He stopped a few paces from her, watching her hands move with practiced steadiness. "You ever thought about keeping a milk cow?" he asked. She pressed a weed flat beneath her boot. "Only if you're the one waking up before dawn to pull on its teats." "I was thinking of you," he said. "You've got more patience." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Patience runs out before daylight. Better stick to dry stock." He laughed under his breath and set the spade against the fence post. "Then we'll trade for a goat." Dakota shaded her eyes with one hand. "That the future you see for us? Goats and beans and 30 winters of dust in our lungs." He looked at her a long time. "I see you. Still here." She didn't speak, but something in her face shifted as if the words had peeled back a layer she wasn't ready to name. That evening, she stayed out long after the sky turned violet. The chickens had gone quiet in the coop, and fireflies blinked low in the grass as she walked the edge of the field. She stopped where the land dipped toward the creek. Quentin found her there just before dark, holding something in her hands. "You carved this?" she asked, turning a small wooden horse over between her fingers. The sanding marks were uneven and the legs didn't match. He shrugged. Made it when I was 16, never showed it to anyone. She traced the snout with her thumb. Why give it to me? I don't know, he said. Felt like it belonged to someone who wouldn't laugh. Dakota let the silence fall again. The wind stirred the tall grass around them. I haven't had anything of my own since I was 17, she said finally. Not a thing I didn't steal or trade my pride for. You don't owe me anything back, he said. I know, she whispered. They stood there until the chill settled into the air. She didn't hand the carving back. The next morning, Quentin was splitting wood when he saw dust rising from the road. One rider. Quick pace. He dropped the axe and stepped onto the porch, hand resting near the rifle by the door, though he didn't reach for it yet. The man dismounted slow, wiping sweat from his brow. Name's Arlen Pike, he said. Looking for a woman. Said she might have been brought through here 2 months back. Dakota stepped out behind Quentin, arms crossed. I'm not going back, she said evenly. Pike's eyes narrowed. Didn't say you had to, but you left a trail. One of the girls you rode with, she's gone. Folks are asking questions back in Benton. Quentin stayed quiet, waiting. She was sick, Dakota said. Didn't make it through the second week. They buried her outside Havre. I didn't mark the place. Didn't have anything to mark it with. Pike nodded once. Folks back east are asking. Her brother's stirring up trouble. You might want to be careful. Thanks for the warning, Quentin said. Wasn't for you, Pike replied, stepping back into the stirrups. Just figured someone should know. He rode off without another word. That night, Dakota didn't come in straight from supper. Quentin found her sitting behind the barn, knees drawn up, hands clasped tight. She was only 15, she said. Wanted to see the mountains, kept a photo of her mother in her boot. He sat beside her, didn't speak. I told her we'd find work once we made it through. That nobody'd touch us if we stuck together. You did what you could. I left her alone with a fever. I shouldn't have. The crickets filled the long pause between them. Quentin reached out and took her hand. She let him. I keep thinking, she said, voice low, if I hadn't gotten out, I'd be in the ground too. You got out, he said. You're here now. She leaned into his side then, just enough to rest her temple against his shoulder. I keep waiting for it to be taken away, she murmured. It won't be, he said. She turned her face toward him. Her eyes searched his for something buried deep. Then I need to know, she said, voice steady, if you're with me because I'm convenient or because you truly want me here. He didn't shy away. I want you here, he said. Not out of pity. Not because I had to, because I see who you are and I want a life with you in it. She didn't answer right away, but when she did, her voice was quiet and certain. Then I'll stay. And she meant it. By late July, the air hung thick with heat and the scent of pine sap, and the fields buzzed with insects that never seemed to sleep. Quentin had taken to rising before the sun, moving slow and steady through the work while the light was still soft. Dakota did the same, though she never said why. She just fell in beside him each morning like she'd always belonged to the rhythm of early chores and long silences. They'd begun building a second loft in the barn for grain storage. Quentin measured each beam twice, but Dakota was the one who balanced on the rafters to drive the nails. She didn't ask for help unless she truly needed it, and she never waited to be told what to do. Was your uncle the one who taught you to build? Quentin asked, handing her another plank. No, she said, setting it in place. One of the women at a freight yard in Salina. She was missing 3 fingers and still laid joists straighter than most men I knew. You liked her. She didn't speak much, but she never looked through me. They worked in silence after that until the loft was framed, and only then did Dakota sit back on her heels and glance down at him. You ever think about what kind of man you'd be if no one ever gave you a second chance? He rested his forearm on the ladder rung. I think I'd be alone. She didn't reply, but when she climbed down, she didn't let go of the ladder right away. Her hand brushed his, and she didn't pull it back. That night she asked if he'd ever had a dog. Had a brindle mutt when I was a boy, he said. Called him Jasper, dumb as fence post but loyal. What happened to him? Fell through the ice. I couldn't get to him in time. She didn't ask anything more after that. But the next afternoon, she rode into town with some eggs and a small sack of dried beans. When she came back, a gangly pup with one white ear and a crooked tail followed close behind her horse's hooves. Quentin stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands. Where'd he come from? Behind the blacksmith shed. Was digging through a pile of rags. Nobody claimed him. The pup sniffed at Quentin's boots, then dropped flat on its belly with a groan. He's ugly, Quentin said. He's quiet, she replied. And he doesn't ask for anything. Quentin smiled. You're keeping him then? I figured he could learn to stay, same as I did. A week passed, then two. The pup she started calling him Birch took to following Dakota everywhere, even curling up on the porch at night beside her chair. She'd taken to reading aloud in the evenings, her voice low and slow, words she borrowed from a water-stained book of sermons she found behind the stove. You believe in anything? She asked one evening, not looking up from the page. Quentin leaned back, arms crossed over his chest. I believe in land that doesn't lie, she nodded. That's better than most preachers offer. He studied her face in the lamplight, sharp in the cheekbones, soft at the edges now. She looked less like someone waiting to run, more like someone who'd chosen to stay. You ever want something that scared you? She asked. Quentin didn't answer right away. Then he said, You. Dakota set the book down, spine open against her thigh. Why? Because you saw through me quicker than I saw through myself. She shifted in her seat. I spent years learning how to read men before they could read me. And what did you read in me? He asked. That you were tired of pretending you didn't want something more. He exhaled through his nose. You were right. She stood and walked to the edge of the porch, Birch rising to follow her. She let the quiet stretch again, long enough that Quentin didn't expect her to speak again. But then she turned, hands loose at her sides. I've never known what it feels like to be wanted where I'm allowed to want back. You are now, he said. The wind picked up through the trees, brushing her hair across her cheek. She didn't move to fix it. I don't need a promise, she said. I need a place where I don't have to hide. You have both, he said. No conditions. She stepped forward then, slow and certain, and when she reached him, she touched his chest with her palm. I don't want to sleep in separate rooms anymore. No one's asking you to, he said. That night, the bed felt different, not because of the way they lay close, but because of the way they didn't need to speak. Her hand found his beneath the quilt, fingers curled into his like they belonged nowhere else. And far off in the dark, the pup let out one contented sigh, already asleep at their door. The first storm of August rolled in just before dusk, thick clouds pressing low over the ridge as the sky turned the color of old pewter. Quentin was hauling in the last of the tools when the wind kicked up sharp from the west, flattening the grass in sudden sheets. Dakota had already brought the chickens in and latched the coop tight. She stood in the doorway with a lantern hooked low at her side, watching the sky with narrowed eyes. You ever see lightning strike that close? She asked as he reached the steps. Closer than I liked, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Split a pine clean in two north of here, back when I was still hauling freight. She stepped aside to let him in as thunder rolled far off, low and steady like a wagon rumbling over loose boards. Inside, the cabin glowed dim with lamplight. The dog paced once, then curled himself tight beneath the table, ears flat. Dakota hung the lantern and began unlacing her boots, her face unreadable. Quentin was halfway through unbuttoning his collar when she said, I got a letter. He turned. From where? From a woman in Helena. One of the girls I was supposed to be sold with. She got out too. Married now, says they've got a small boarding house near the river. She asked if I wanted to visit. He studied her quietly. You thinking of going? I don't know, she said, straightening. Feels strange being asked. Having a place to go that isn't survival. Quentin stepped closer. You could go, I'd wait. I don't think I want to go alone, she said. His hand found hers, fingers rough and warm from the day's work. You wouldn't have to. She nodded slowly, then looked up at him. I keep thinking I'm still running, even when I'm standing still. You're not, he said. You stopped when you were ready. That was yours to decide. The rain came sudden and loud, drumming against the roof in heavy bursts. She leaned into him, not for comfort, just to be near. That night, with the wind curling around the corners of the house, they lay beneath the quilt without need for words. Her leg rested against his, her breathing steady. Outside, the storm passed in slow waves. Inside, there was only stillness. By the next week, they decided to ride to Helena together. Not hurried, not fleeing, just going because they could. They left Birch with an older neighbor who raised sheep and had a fondness for strays. Dakota packed light, just her satchel and a shawl she'd stitched from spare wool. Quentin brought a small box he never opened, tucked deep in his saddlebag. They traveled slow, stopping beneath cottonwoods and sleeping near dry creeks, eating from the small parcels they'd prepared. She rode ahead more often than not, eyes forward, chin lifted. He let her lead. In Helena, the boarding house sat on a quiet street where hollyhocks bloomed against the fence line. The woman who greeted them had silver streaks in her hair and a scar on her jaw, but her voice was warm and sure. Dakota embraced her without hesitation. They stayed 3 nights. Dakota helped clean the second floor while Quentin fixed the door hinges and realigned the porch steps. No one asked questions. No one stared. On the last morning, Dakota sat beside Quentin on the edge of the porch, a cup of weak coffee in her hands. She wants me to stay, she said. He looked out at the street. Do you want to? She waited a moment. No, I want to go home. He looked at her then, and she was already watching him. I think we could do more than just live quiet, she said. I think we could build something that lasts. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out the small wooden box and set it on her lap. She opened the lid slowly. Inside was a thin silver band, old but polished, and a folded piece of paper with her name on it, written in his hand. I carved it myself, he said. When I realized I wanted you to stay for good. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She slid the ring onto her finger and ran her thumb over the edge. I'll wear it, she said, if you promise never to tell me what to do. He grinned. Never even crossed my mind. They rode back together, the trail familiar, the silence between them easy. By the time they reached the homestead, the fields were gold with late summer light and the barn smelled of hay and dust. Birch barreled toward them from the neighbor's porch, tail wagging like he'd waited a year. Dakota stepped down from her horse and looked around like she was seeing it all fresh. We'll need to rebuild that lean-to before autumn, she said. I already started drawing up the plans, he replied. That night they danced beneath the stars, just the two of them on the dirt-packed ground outside the cabin. No music, just the sound of the crickets and the soft crush of their boots. Years passed and the land grew with them. They added a milk shed, a smokehouse, and a covered well. Dakota kept a ledger in the kitchen drawer, and Quentin built a cradle from pine when it came time. Their child was born in spring, red-cheeked and loud as thunder, and Dakota laughed like she hadn't in years when she held him. They never left the land, never needed to. Sometimes visitors came through and asked how they'd met. Quentin would shrug and say, "She found me when I wasn't looking." Dakota would nod and add, "And then I stayed." And that was the truth of it. No sudden revelations, no grand speeches. Just two people who met where their lives cracked open and chose to build something steady in the space left behind. They grew old together, side by side, hands weathered, hearts quiet but full. And every night, no matter the season, she reached for his hand beneath the covers, and he was always there to hold it.